live on Facebook, but if you do have questions, drop them in our Q&A and we will do our best to answer them all. Now, an introduction to our panelists. Lori Thomas, the Executive Director of Golden Gate Restaurant Association. What started as a personal love of food and a side business venture as a restaurant investor turned into a full career for Lori Thomas. Owner of Nice Ventures, which currently owns and manages 2 successful restaurants in San Francisco, Rosa's Cafe and Terzo. In January 2020, Thomas took on the executive director position for the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, a nonprofit trade organization focused on helping Bay Area restaurants survive and thrive. Sharky Laguana, our Small Business Commission president. Sharky is the founder and chief executive officer of Vandango, a company that rents passenger vans through the United States. In 2018, he led the effort to pass AB 2620, a California state law that helps reduce the number of rental vehicles stolen in California. He has also worked with the SF District Attorney's Office to reduce the number of car break-ins in San Francisco. Thank you for that, Sharky. Randall Scott, the Executive Director of Fisherman's Wharf Community Benefit District. Randall is the Executive Director. In that role, he immediately is responsible for the 30 square foot blocks of property and the businesses within the boundaries of the district to provide cleaner, safer, and enhanced marketing service above and beyond what the city provides. In addition to his regular duties, Randall was part of the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force and is an active member of the Aquatic Park Pier Project, the San Francisco CBD BID Consortium Clean and Safe 365, and a myriad of other panels and committees, an endless advocate for positive change. Thank you. Joaquin Torres was sworn in recently as the assessor recorder by Mayor London Breed on February 8th. Prior to his appointment, Torres served as the director of the San Francisco Office of Economic and Workforce Development. And he's led citywide efforts to mitigate economic hardships on businesses and workers during the pandemic. Assessor Torres is also president of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission, leading the oversight body as an authority and city implement and re-envisioning process to rehabilitate over 3,400 units of public housing with $750 million in improvement. He lives in the Outer Mission with his wife. Last but definitely not least, President Shamann Walton. He's a native of San Francisco. He's worked in District 10 neighborhoods for decades and has witnessed firsthand the challenges the community faces from longtime residents being pushed out of the city and losing childhood friends to violence and incarceration. As an accomplished and experienced community leader, Shamann has dedicated his life to improving these realities in the community and committed to identifying solutions in our pressing issues. Thank you so much, President, for being here tonight. And panelists, thank you all for joining us. At this time, I want to hand it over to Assessor Recorder Torres for an overview on the state of our economy. Joaquin, please take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Megan, and thank you very much for the warm introduction. It's great to be on with so many of the panelists tonight and to discuss our San Francisco path to economic recovery and resiliency here in the Bay Area. I'm going to share a little bit of my perspective on this topic through the lens of my formal role as a director of the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and as well as the new assessor recorder here in San Francisco. But I do want to thank everyone on this call and on this webinar for your participation, and also for all the leadership that you've exhibited to ensure that we're on a path to recovery. Give me just a couple of moments while I figure out how to share my screen. Okay.
Assessor Torres, you got to work quick.
That's right. That is right. It's good to see you, President Walton. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right, well, I just wanted to start out with a bit of a snapshot of San Francisco's demographics in 2018. Population of about 881,000 individuals. The daytime population increased to 1.1 million, with workers that were coming into the city for work and for visits. The median age was 38. Median household income, as you can see here, about $112,000. And the poverty rate existing at about 10.9% in San Francisco. Home values were higher than any other peer city. In San Francisco, 62% of housing units were renter occupied, which is higher than most peer cities. In 2018, there were 353,000 white residents, 301,000 Asian, and 68.7 Latinx residents, the second and third most common ethnic groups in our city and county. The most common foreign languages spoken in San Francisco: Chinese, Mandarin, and Cantonese, about 151,000 speakers; Spanish, 85,000 speakers; Tagalog, including Filipinos, 22,000 speakers. But we're more segregated than our California peers when it comes to Black and white segregation here in the city. And I think that's something important that I think you'll hear from President Walton speak about our collective efforts to ensure that we're addressing that. And congratulations again, President Walton, on the Dreamkeeper initiative that you and Mayor Breed and the HRC, Human Rights Commission, launched and announced earlier this week. Really reflective of extraordinary engagement, which we'll talk about later on today, and also the vision to serve our communities during a very specific time of need. The economy of San Francisco employs about 537,000 people. Largest industries: professional, scientific, and technical services, about 114,000. Healthcare, social assistance, 56,000. Retail trade, about 49,000 individuals. Sorry, let me pull that up there for you. A year ago, the unemployment rate was 1.9%. I want to make sure that it's important to note that for the Black community, Latinx, and API communities, it was still greater than that, 3 times greater than the Black community, 2.5 times greater, or 2 times greater for the Latinx and API communities, respectively. 580,000 residents employed, 11,300 unemployed in San Francisco. Tourism was extraordinarily strong, as shown by the hotel occupancy rate. That was almost at 94%, with an average room rate of about $280. The real estate market was also strong in 2019. According to Zillow, the median home value is about $1.4 million in 2019. Median rent value, $4,235. For the commercial market, the office vacancy rate was at 5.6%, which represents a percentage of available rental units. And this also shows the average asking rents for office real estate that you see there. The revenues, and general fund revenues that before COVID-19 hit in San Francisco, the San Francisco Bay Area region led in GDP growth year after year. San Francisco had a GDP of over 200 billion. The city experienced strong employment, strong real estate values, strong sales and tourism. The 7th highest income county in the United States among 3,142. That strength and growth contributed significant revenues to the city to fund schools, to fund our local services. The city's general fund sees revenues from hundreds of sources, federal and state sources that you see here, as well as local businesses, hotels, sales, property taxes. Businesses being the pillar of our economy, contributing significant revenues of over $1 billion. Under other local taxes, we find hotel room tax revenues that account for $500 million a year in revenue in the past, sales tax totaling $213 million. Why are some of these areas important? Because most specifically for arts and culture, in terms of how we're providing resources specifically for those needs. And of course, property taxes brought in $2 billion to the general fund. when it comes to the financial scorecard that we realize. And just to give you a sense of the rate, I'm going to keep on going pretty quickly because I know we have a lot to cover, but I want to make sure I give you this general overview to give you the complexity that we're facing. The fiscal foundation, extraordinarily strong. Our GEO bond rating, that AAA rating, enables us to fund those large capital projects. City can issue bonds, getting access to debt. Purchase of those bonds, of course, provides a financing for those capital projects, so that rating matters to us. In general terms, of fund balance is a difference of available funds after accounting for a government assets minus its liabilities. Unrestricted fund balance available in the general fund is viewed by rating agencies, financial professionals, as a general high-level indicator of our health. And last year, we had an all-time high in stabilization reserves. March 16th of last year, so we're almost coming into the year in which shelter in place was enacted by Mayor Breed. That was after the state of emergency was enacted to make sure that we could be prepared for that. And of course, we all know what that day was like. Many of you who are on the call right now were on the phone with me right before and right after we announced that move. So now where are we? COVID-19 impact on employment. Overnight, what took years and decades for us to achieve in strength and stability was overturned. Much of California and San Francisco's economic engine hit that wall, and reserves were tapped to respond to the emergency. It's important, though, as well, to highlight the role that philanthropy has played in this process as well. Our health and generosity of those philanthropists also supported efforts to support those who have been hit hardest by the pandemic. One of those hard hit areas and most immediate areas was employment, with that spike in unemployment so much sharper and faster than we saw after 9/11 or after the dot-com bust. For the state, unemployment insurance claims rose to a high of 12 million in April of 2020. You can see here, the chart shows San Francisco had that record rate of 1.9%. We saw that reach a high during the pandemic of about 12.6%. Then in November, we saw that drop down to 5.9% before it kind of came up again to about 6.4% in December. The largest job losses, all of us know this. I know Lori can talk to this as well. Leisure, hospitality, where half the jobs went away between February and April. San Francisco lost 4 out of 5 bar jobs, 2 out of 3 restaurant jobs from February to April. Altogether, San Francisco saw peak losses of over 50,000 in only 3 major local industries. So very concentrated impacts, very concentrated effects. Restaurants lost the most jobs of any local industry, 35,000, a little over 35,000 lost jobs. Some of those industries who held on, lowest job loss rates, financial activities. You've seen a 3.1% increase since February of last year. And professional and business services, which held steady. So you see here in terms of the number of San Franciscans who filed for unemployment, the percentage of the labor force that they represent, the 50,500 San Franciscans who lost a job or stopped looking for a job. When you really start looking at this data, it gets nuanced very quickly. As President Walton knows, not only in his current leadership role right now, but also as his life as an executive director of Young Community Developers and the work that he's doing in communities, you start paying attention to exactly what's happening and the nuances there, where the need is being felt. Not just that high-level perspective, but getting down into the details. Leisure and hospitality, including restaurants, accounted for 43.6% of lost jobs from November of 2019 to November of 2020. Retail accounted for 13.7% of those unemployment rates. From April to June, taxable sales or money spent by consumers plunged 50% to $2.6 billion compared to a year ago. More than a third of that reduction, or $1 billion, came from retail and food businesses. 2 areas, of course, we all know that were mostly closed during that time. Small businesses were suffering not only because of the direct impacts, but the ancillary impacts. No office workers. Where are the tourists? Residents moving out of the city for the time being for more affordable areas. According to our city's economists, many of you might have been hearing about this, Ted Egan had talked about the pandemic bringing about a K-shaped recession in the city, where high wage earners are likely to be working from home, doing pretty good. Lower wage workers are severely feeling economic pain. You are hearing that in national news network stories, statewide stories, local stories. That is a reality, and that is why the equity framework for us is so important. Compared to a strong financial picture a year ago, we're now projecting a $411 million shortfall in the next fiscal year, largely due to business tax revenue drops by 19% from prior year actuals, sales tax reductions, 50% levels, hotel room tax reductions by 89% due to the restrictions on non-essential travel. Some light on the horizon. 2 days ago, you saw us San Francisco move into the red tier, allowing restaurants to open indoors at 25%, retail to operate at 50%, theaters and museums at 25%, gyms at 10%, and personal care services to open indoors. Again, I'll stop here, but I wanted to provide that background about where we are today. Some of those general high-level impacts give you a sense of where we are. And then also, again, just being very specific that like the light behind President Walton, it is starting to rise again as we start to see more activity, more people starting to take activity seriously, more flexibility being provided, but that's only been made possible because of the extraordinary efforts and sacrifices of individuals, of families, of small businesses during this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. All right, so just as a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, please drop them in the Q&A and we will do our best to respond to them. But we do have some questions to get through here. So this one I'm going to open with is general. It's for all panelists. And I think I'll start with you, Sharky, because you were the first person I see on my screen. So here's the question. What is the most important thing right now that you'd like to see change to aid our economic recovery?
I think when we think about the city and we think about how we got to such a place of enormous success, as Assessor Torres was talking about, it was through innovation and a lot of development in technology and biotechnology, and we really enjoyed a lot of success from that. And one of the things that came out of that success was a bit of an abundance mindset, where you can afford to be kind of picky and choosy about how folks go about business and how they go about doing things. I think the biggest thing that the city can do right now is change to a hunger mindset. Of really wanting that business, of really wanting to create opportunities. That psychological mindset difference, I think, is how we start to see some of the change that we need to see citywide in order to enable a recovery.
Great, thank you. If anybody wants to add to that, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I will call on you. Okay, Randall, go for it.
To kind of build on that, and also, one of the platforms that Mayor Breed ran on was, fixing what's wrong with the city, and COVID just accelerated that. And we saw, they dropped the permitting process. They sped up a lot and eliminated a lot of the bureaucracy that came with it. Shared spaces is a great example of that, and has allowed revenue to come back to the restaurants. And expand on that. And I think that's going to stay. At least I know it's going to go through 2022. And so eliminating that bureaucratic red tape, I think, is the number one thing that they can do to stimulate small business recovery and assist in the permitting process and drop those fees to really release the burdens that the city in the past has placed on the small business community. So I would say that's the number one thing that the city can do for the small businesses.
I just wanted to jump in and just add a health factor and component to this, because getting the vaccine into the arms of people here in the city is a high priority and very important. Obviously, the more folks who get vaccinated, the more opportunities we have to open our businesses, to bring tourism back, to really just have the robust and thriving city that we had prior to the pandemic. So we have to push this vaccine. We have to make sure folks understand how important it is to get vaccinated, and that will allow us to open up all of our industries. And I think that piece is very important.
Thank you. Lori, would you like to chime in?
Well, Randall took what my important point was, but I thank you for having me, Megan, and nice to see everybody. I don't know if I've met President Walton, but I know everyone else on the call other than Megan. I did want to reiterate that obviously Joaquim's presentation underscores the need to do the most important thing, which is to help our restaurants and the businesses that live in that ecosystem to be able to reemploy their workers. And the way to do that is definitely to continue the shared spaces program. I know that that is enabled. I also have 2 small restaurants in the Cow Hollow neighborhood that has enabled our teams to bring back 80% of our prior workforce. And without that, they would be dead. And that is not enough as we move to reopening. That is important. And I think we want to remember that we're all in this together and we're not all going to have the same outlook. But when we went to shut down the city again before in early December, the evening of December 6th, I had a very animated call with the health officer, Dr. Aragon, and he said, Lori, the reason we're shutting down the restaurants is I want to get rid of the street traffic to the neighborhoods. We need to shut everything down and we need to do it now. And so we know that having places to gather and go to and things that employ people also helps our retail. And we're committed with the GGRA and our friends here to do whatever it takes to try to get to a compromise that's going to work for, I'd like to see it much longer than 2 years, but to continue to work for the city. And then just to piggyback President Walton, we really have to continue to work on access to getting the vaccines into the arms of our restaurant workers, particularly the Latinx community. My other friend at OEWD, now that Joaquim is gone, poor Laurel's been on my my text dial, and we've had several issues where a Mexican ID was not accepted. I jumped in this morning, we fixed it. I can speak personally. One of my senior sous chefs was twice rejected. I won't tell you which company because hopefully it's been fixed. But I'm willing to work with our friends in the Latinx community and everything, and that is just fundamentally not what we are about, nor should we be doing. We need to get everybody there. And once they're there, we do not need to turn them away. We need to vaccinate them at their appointed time. So I think this is the most critical thing to move forward. Vaccines and continuing to have opportunities to come back to work.
Thank you so much for that. Joaquin, I'll give you a break on this question because you just did a long presentation. But kind of in this same vein of talking about parklets, I do want to quickly go over to a question I got in the audience. Now, this is kind of going away from my format, but it's relevant. So will restaurants that have added parklets for outdoor dining be able to keep them once the pandemic is declared over? If yes, will businesses incur any future permit or other fees to keep the parklets? Can anyone on this call speak to that question?
I'll jump in real quick and I will say yes, and most likely yes. But the first one, emphatically yes. I will go down swinging to the last drop, fighting for shared spaces because 93% of shared spaces participants want to see it become public. I just did a straw poll online just to see how the general public feels about it. We had responses from all 12 districts in San Francisco. Over 350 people responded to this poll. Also 93% in support of shared spaces becoming permanent. We know that as Lori was saying, and as Assessor Torres said, most of our, the impact of unemployment is highest and most painful in the restaurant industry. And what the restaurant industry is saying loud and clear is that shared spaces is how we're going to begin that recovery. I think we have all discovered as members of the public that it helps make the city more magical. And I think we've only scratched the beginning of potential and opportunity that shared spaces represents for the city. So I could not be a more emphatic supporter. But, you know, it is a use of public space, and it's likely that restaurants are going to have to pay for that access to that space, and retail shops. And that's okay. We'll find a way to make that work. But right now, we've got to focus on recovery.
And I just want to jump in and reiterate, if you look at the recent reopening guidelines and working with Dr. Phillip on this, we really want to encourage people to sit outside for a while longer. We need to get those second shots into everybody's arms. We need to get some more confidence on where we are with the variants. And you'll see that we've loosened the outside curfew. We've said you can do 3 households up to 6. These are safer places, and we want people to be confident and, in fact, build more of them if they can. We don't want to shove everybody inside because it's running out, say, in June or something. So we want to keep thinking about the health effects of these spaces as well.
Thank you so much for that. And of course, with shared spaces, you know, there obviously is no one size fits all approach to this, right? Some neighborhoods have more foot traffic than others. Some, you know, have busier restaurants than others. So with that, I kind of want to talk about District 10 and ask President Walton, and it doesn't have to be about parklets, but, you know, let's make it a little bit about parklets. What do you really see is the biggest economic challenge in with regards to the pandemic in District 10?
Well, first, just to piggyback on Commissioner Laquana and the excitement around outdoor shared spaces and parklets, I think that is something we will continue to see in San Francisco. Obviously, it's going to look different in different communities. To your point, Megan, there are nuances that are different. Even in District 10, we have different areas in different communities. Trail Hill is different than Bayview, and Bayview is different than Viz Valley, and Viz Valley is different than Dogpatch. But I have no doubt about it that shared spaces will continue to exist. I just want one caveat too that has to also exist with shared spaces is a good neighbor policy. We have communities where, unfortunately, there are people who live around shared spaces who don't understand how important these shared spaces are for the viability of our restaurants to be able to come back into communities. And they have to be able to work with restaurants and our businesses to support them and understand that we're all inconvenienced in this pandemic. And it's important that we work together because we can't lose, obviously, our neighbors, and we can't lose our businesses during this pandemic. And so we have to understand that everyone has to work together in our communities. The biggest impacts for us, obviously, of course, with the pandemic are our small businesses were hit very, very hard. A lot of food insecurity in District 10, particularly in Visitation Valley in certain areas, in the Bayview in certain areas, a small pocket of Potrero Hill, our public housing communities. Unemployment hit us pretty hard, even though we have a lot of essential workers that continue to work even through the pandemic. And that's why you see higher rates of folks who have contracted the virus here in District 10. And so between unemployment, between the virus, between all of the food insecurities and the impacts of evictions and things that take away one's economic opportunity for their household, all of that has exacerbated issues in District 10. And one major thing that we've seen change so much is the increase of folks who live on our streets in the district, and primarily who live in their vehicles. And so we've obviously had a lot of folks living in streets in our community in San Francisco and in D10 prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has really exacerbated the number of folks we have on our streets, especially in vehicles. And we have 3 navigation centers. We have a safe sleeping site. We have an RV site. We are stepping up in major ways as a district to support people who have been living on the street, to try to get them in the shelter, to try to get them in the long-term goal, of course, is permanent housing and the wraparound services and support that they need. But we still have a lot of fighting to do, and shelter capacity has decreased. We're down to a little bit over 20% due to the pandemic and the social distancing guidelines. So we have a ways to go to open up our shelters, get folks back and on track for permanent housing, affordable housing, and our shelter-in-place hotels have really been an important tool to getting people off the street and to addressing the unhoused population issues we have. But those are a lot of the issues that we're having, and The last thing I'll say is obviously the increase of learning loss for a large number of our young people who already were affected by the gaps in achievement. Obviously, this is something that we're going to have to do to change that and provide accelerated learning opportunities as a city to deal with some of that learning loss. I can name a whole bunch of other things, but I want to share the space. But there's a lot we've had to deal with, and we worked together with a lot of folks on this panel to do that. Obviously, Assessor Torres in his former role, obviously working closely with Commissioner Laguana, and even with our folks in chambers and a lot of philanthropy to support some of those changes that we'll talk about a little bit more.
Thank you. And that was a lot of different things that we're looking at in terms of District 10. I feel like there's at least 4 other panel discussions that we'll need to host. So Bruce, take those notes. Thank you for that. But you did say something about essential workers. I know a lot of them are in D10. And I kind of want to pass it over to you, Lori. What concerns are you hearing from essential workers that are employed in hospitality and service?
Well, thank you. I think the first concern is what we just spoke to, which is how do we get people to make the appointments, and how do we get people to feel comfortable? I think the first challenge is making appointments. And I think we who are on Zoom and computers and literate on computers and have access to internet and things, we forget how really hard it is to be forced to go online, particularly if English isn't your first language, and navigate through whether it's at Walgreens or a city site or whatever. And this is not dissing the city. I think that the city site is great. It's just, we personally have tried to sit folks down and get them signed up, and then get them to go to the appointments, and then, you know, have them said like, well, you can only accept a California driver's license and things like that, when they have their pay stub right there with their address and things. So we are working through these challenges, and this is a lot, but the access is the most important thing. And then I think the other thing is really continuing to beat the drum that we really need the public to try to adhere to the safety guidelines. And if you're going to go out and dine, you have to put your mask on when somebody approaches the table, because otherwise you're exposing the worker to potentially your breath. And if you're not comfortable doing that, and I know it is a pain, and I know it is not normal dining behavior, I say it to my husband all the time, put your mask on before the server approaches, then, you know, maybe you're not ready to go out and dine in public yet. Maybe you should order to go pick it up and eat at home. And I can't reiterate how hard it is to put this type of policing behavior on a restaurant worker or several restaurant workers. And so we ask the public support in doing that, so that we don't have to constantly be like, oh, my poor servers, I'm not going to approach the table, and then they don't get a tip, or it escalates into a conflict. And I hate to say this, but this is reality in a lot of the restaurant world. So if people can just know what's going on, and we can help with signage, and Joaquin, the team's been doing a great job with this rollout. We had 7 days notice. We've had everything together. This was a gold standard, this last reopening. You know, it'll be helpful, but Megan, that's really been the stress. The vaccination thing the past week, it's great, but I'd like to see a couple of days of open walk-in sites where we don't have to pre-register everybody through a computer portal. That's my ask. So I'd like to see that.
Thank you so much for that, Lori. So these essential workers who are needing support and making sure they make it to their vaccination sites, they're working in areas of San Francisco that are considered destination areas. They're relying on public transportation. One of the amazing things that the mayor said, and Randall and Lori, you were there, I saw you at the announcement for going into red tier, is that we will have the F and cable cars returning, both which are huge staples in San Francisco in terms of transportation, just really fun to ride. People love it. But let's talk a little bit about that, Randall, because they're going over into your neighborhood. I know they're not planned to be there until the fall, but let's talk about what Fisherman's Wharf is looking like. That is our key destination area for San Francisco. Walk us through what you were seeing on the ground over the last 3 months. And our tourists returning, our businesses expanding, or with hours in operations. What does it look like in Fisherman's Wharf?
So the wharf has benefited the fact that we're an outdoor venue, from Ghirardelli all the way to Pier 39. So in the pandemic, we have fared better pedestrian-wise than some of the other parts of the city. That said, these people are there walking, enjoying the outside, and the commerce hasn't picked up as much as the pedestrian traffic has. And yeah, we are seeing the lifeblood come back, and but the beauty is, and we'd like to get the word out, and we're going to be working on that, is this is San Francisco's wharf. This is our wharf. So come out and enjoy it. Yes, the tourists will be returning, and yes, we will see, slowly the numbers tick up. But for the, even year round, Monday through Thursday, you can come down to the wharf and enjoy some of the best seafood in the world, and enjoy some great retail. And it's just a nice place to hang out and be. Now with COVID hitting, it's an even better destination. The reason being is it's all outdoors. Crab stand, grab a crab sandwich, sit out on the water and enjoy the area. So overall, we're poised to, come back pretty strong out of this for those businesses that can, survive the pandemic impact. Now, with regard to the public transportation, we are heavily reliant, and our employees are heavily reliant throughout all the businesses of the F line, because a lot of them come in via BART and then they have to get down to the wharf. The only way to do that effectively is the F line. So we're working with our partners, and it was fantastic that they heard our voice at SFMTA and said, yes, we're going to put the F line back. So we're ecstatic that that's coming back, and we're going to have a brand new Jefferson Street on top of it. So it's a lot of exciting things will be coming to the wharf, and I highly encourage all of the locals to come down and re-experience the wharf as you did when you were a kid. The mayor talks about the arcade all the time on Pier 39. It's all of us have memories of coming to the wharf as kids, and just kind of reimagine that. The cable cars are, they're a symbol and a beacon of San Francisco all around the world. Everybody knows the San Francisco cable cars. So to have the cable cars coming back soon it sends a message to the entire globe that San Francisco is open, and our businesses, our restaurants, our retailers, our essential workers who are currently sitting home unemployed in the hospitality and tourism industries need those jobs. We need to get the city and the economy back up and running. And so it's do the local tourists and everything, or local citizens and residents jump on the cable cars? No, not really. California line runs a fair amount, but it's not about the cable car itself. It's what the cable car represents that we need to get those things back, and back as quickly as possible, because it is a message to the world and the globe. And yes, they do terminate at Fisherman's Wharf, at Hyde and Taylor, but it's about the symbolism, the symbolic nature of those cable cars running that says San Francisco's back. So I don't know if I answered all those questions that you put forward to me, Megan, but
I think you did, and then some. Thank you so much, Randall. I want to kind of bring it over to Assessor Recorder Joaquin Torres, but he says I can call him Joaquin, so I'm going to call you Joaquin.
Thanks, Meg.
Yeah. All right. So this is kind of a two-part question.
Mhm.
So someone asked, so let me start with the first question. Throughout the challenges of COVID-19, OEWD stood out as a true leader of supporting small businesses and workers in need. Assessor Torres, what accomplishments are you most proud of as OEWD's director during the pandemic? But then also, can you explain to us what your new position is like as assessor recorder? Because I think some people need to learn and understand. We're so used to you being OEWD, we have to get used to this new title.
It's getting used to it, right? It's the same thing for me. When you spend 8 years in a department at every single level, whether it's about neighborhoods, small businesses, industry, hospitality, tourism, through that office, it's very hard to step away. But I couldn't be luckier than to step into the assessor recorder's office, because it's so important in terms of the financial backbone it provides through fair and equitable taxation, and drawing and collecting those property tax revenues, those business personal property tax revenues, to ensure that we're collecting funds that support those general services that help fund like those grants that went to shared spaces, or that support our schools and our kids and our youth through those resources as well. So making sure that instead of spending money, I'm making sure that we're collecting it so we can see what priorities are being met through those funds is a primary function of the Assessor Recorder's Office. And if you have any questions about anything you receive from our office, please do call 311. I went through the process myself today, so I could say with confidence that 311 can help you through that. But also you can just always reach out. What am I most proud of? I think based on the theme that we just had around workers, I could talk about all the new grant programs that we created. I could talk about the Family Relief Fund that we built together with President Walton and Mayor Breed that provided relief to families at the crux of the pandemic to make sure that there was relief for them. The new Black Business Revolving Loan Fund that is supporting over 100 African-American owned small businesses in San Francisco. I could talk about the Immigrant and Latino Loan Fund and the Immigrant Worker Fund. But I think I want to focus on the workers for a moment. People didn't have access to paid sick leave, low-income workers in particular. And they didn't have a place to go if they could not access state or federal resources. Mayor Breed, together with Supervisor Hillary Ronen, created a program called the Right to Recover. And because of philanthropic funding that we aggressively pursued, because of city funding that complemented those efforts, we made sure that people who had to quarantine through the development of that program could do so safely by giving them the resources they needed to do that for their families. Because what is someone going to do when their livelihoods are on the line and there's nothing for them? They're probably going to keep on working if they're not sure that they've been tested or not. But we wanted them to get tested. We wanted them to quarantine. And we created a program that gave them those 2 weeks of pay that helped them do so. And I really got to thank the workforce team at OEWD, Josh Arce and his team, Chad Houston at OEWD, who helped make that happen. That was a big, big deal. And making sure that not only across the board that our workers are being supported, but our artists are being supported as well, and our cultural institutions. And being creative about that, meeting a public health goal, meeting an economic goal, and meeting an equity goal. So deeply important. Whenever we could make that happen and make that magic happen, that is what I'm most proud of. What I'm most excited for, though, is continued and safe reopening so people can go to work. People can feel like they're living again, and we can continue our push forward around achieving an equitable, vibrant, resilient city. That's most important for me.
Thank you so much. And both said, we have some questions coming in, and I will keep this one to you, Assessor Recorder. The question is, how much of the local taxes is derived from the 25% tax collected by the city on parking revenues? Is it a significant source of revenue for the city?
I can't speak to that directly because that's not something that we focus on through the Assessor Recorder's Office. However, I'm guessing that it's around balancing the revenue that will be gotten from parking spaces and how to make sure that we can continue to support shared spaces. That's an absolute great question. It's one that's being explored with department heads who are focused on how do we keep shared spaces moving forward. And I look forward to coming back and talking more about that.
Wonderful, thank you. And you talked a little bit about what you were proud of, especially in working with the Board of Supervisors. So I'm going to direct this question to President Walton. What actions are you most proud of the Board of Supervisors, which were taken in the past year to support small businesses during the pandemic? And where do you, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, Megan. I thought you were
where do you think the board needs to do more?
Well, one, I just want to say that city departments have stepped up in tremendous ways. We really are going to miss Assessor Torres, I got to get used to saying that, because his role in OEWD was so vital to making sure that we got support for our small businesses and support for our immigrant communities and support for isolated communities due to the pandemic. He talked about, for instance, our family relief, which is one of the first things our office worked on. And we wanted to make sure that folks who would not have an opportunity for support because they didn't qualify for federal resources, they didn't qualify for state resources, was going to have the opportunity to be able to get some support through the pandemic. So we're talking about undocumented workers, we're talking about folks who were not connected to any of those systems, and we're going to be left out. And so definitely proud that we introduced legislation originally to do that. Mayor's office stepped up, we worked together along with OEWD. I also want to just say I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to do for businesses in some of our commercial corridors that are isolated as well. We made sure we got community benefits agreement dollars to support our businesses on the 3rd Street corridor. We made sure that we got revolving loan funds, low interest loan funds for minority businesses, not just Black businesses, for our businesses in Chinatown, for our businesses throughout the city. We push hard to make sure that we continue our eviction moratoriums. That goes for not only residents, but even for commercial businesses as well. We've waived several fees to support businesses to make sure that they can continue to thrive. Obviously, shared spaces, all of us on the Board of Supervisors have worked to make sure that that can happen in the businesses and in our communities. To answer your question about more, we definitely need to do more. There's more that we're working on. There's never a time where we should be complacent about what we can do to help our businesses and to help our economy recover through this process. We're having more conversations about what fees to waive, continuously getting resources and finding resources to support businesses with low interest and no interest loans. Obviously, I fight for as much as possible to get as many grants as we can for our businesses so they do not have to pay resources back, which I think is very important. And philanthropy has played a major role in that. And we continue to look to some of the opportunities through our budget to make sure that we support that work as well. So there's a lot of things that we've done in terms of support, but there are other things that we need to do because our businesses are suffering, and we're having more conversations about what ways to do that and still make sure that we can have a healthy budget here in San Francisco with revenue being decreasing during this pandemic.
Wonderful, thank you. Grants, services for small businesses, relief efforts, all of these things are so important. Sharky, I'm gonna pass it to you really quick. I wanna know, what do you think San Francisco can do to attract businesses to SF and entice new businesses to open? Believe it or not, businesses are opening within this pandemic, but we want more, right? So what do you think the 2 largest industries will be in San Francisco post-COVID?
So, you're so right about entrepreneurship. It's still happening. We certainly need a lot more of it. Going back to comments from Assessor Torres and President Walton, it's so important. We talk a lot about equity in city government. This is why it's important, really, with respect to entrepreneurship. Most new jobs in America come from new businesses, new startups. And so if we're going to breach that unemployment gap, it's going to come from entrepreneurs. Second, women-owned businesses have been the fastest growing sector in the US economy for 2 decades. And entrepreneurship is one of the optimal ways for minorities, immigrants, and women to obtain economic security. And when we talk and think about workers, many of our entry-level jobs are at these new businesses and small businesses that are starting up. And again, that accrues to the benefit of the very minorities, immigrants, and undocumented workers that are now suffering in this period of unemployment. So we've really got to roll out the red carpet and do everything we can to encourage entrepreneurship. I think that starting a business in San Francisco should feel like slipping into a warm hot tub. It should just be easy peasy lemon squeezy, and everything seems really natural. In terms of encouraging visitors, right now, downtown is decimated. A good chunk of our office workers are now working from home, and I suspect a lot of that's going to become a permanent trend. And there's not much we can do to unring that bell, because now folks have seen that it's economically cheaper and it's convenient. We've also lost a couple businesses that have left the city. So I think there's going to be a period here where we're going to have to really think about how we reactivate downtown. And this is really important to all those small businesses that are down there. So bringing visitors back is so important and critical to revitalizing downtown and helping our small businesses citywide. And, when we think about what does it take to bring visitors back, San Francisco has really been kind of a punching bag for the national press, particularly under the prior administration. So we are going to have to sort of reset how people think about the city. We are going to have to make people feel that the city is clean and safe and welcoming. And that's a very challenging hurdle to overcome. It's tough to reset perception, but it can be done, and it will be done because we have to do it. In terms of the two biggest industries, I think tech will continue to be one of them. It has a long way to go before it's not one of the biggest industries. But rather than think about the biggest industries, I prefer to think about the biggest opportunities. So I would like to see a lot of growth in tourism, because I think that's a huge opportunity. We are still the most beautiful city in America, and that will never change. There is no economic change that can happen in the city that's going to change how unbelievably gorgeous it is. Just look at President Walton's background. You can't get a view like that anywhere else. Two, I would like to see the arts come alive, because it is the arts that really makes a city feel special. It brings community together. It creates a sense of who we are and where we're going. And so I want to see more of a focus on the arts in terms of moving forward. And finally, I'll just close with, we can't have a recovery without bringing back our restaurant industry. There is no recovery without a restaurant industry. So shared spaces, as far as I'm concerned. And we need to do everything we can to make that. And by the way, shared spaces could be an outlet for the arts. We think about Burning Man and all the extraordinary creations, that could be in our outdoor shared spaces. When we think about all the incredible culture that our neighborhoods have, I'd love to see what the Mission does with shared spaces at its full potential. I'd love to see what Chinatown and Japantown does with shared spaces at its full potential. So I think we're at the brink of the most incredible transformation of our city. We're so lucky to be here and to experience this transformation and be part of it. And I'm really excited to see what comes next. And I think it will happen, and we will get there.
Well, thank you, Sharky. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, he says. We'll see if that's still the case. You've said something really interesting about culture in San Francisco. And I'm curious, what role, and this question is for everybody, that cultural districts are helping keep San Francisco, alive, keep its identity, and residents are really stepping up and reclaiming their communities and doing different things to make sure that people know where they are when they come to San Francisco. So what role do you think that cultural districts can play in our economic recovery? And I'll start with you, Supervisor Walton.
Thank you so much, Megan. And just briefly before I answer that, I have one disagreement with Commissioner Laguana, and that is San Francisco is the most beautiful city in the world, not just the country.
And that is not a disagreement. I agree wholeheartedly. I misspoke, President Walton. Please forgive me.
Definitely. No, we need to make sure everybody knows that. And I know it to be true. But to answer your question, I think cultural districts, and particularly for areas like District 10, are really the fabric of letting people know and informing people of culture that existed and that is indigenous to these communities, and making sure that we can revive that culture and really turn our areas and our neighborhoods and our communities into destination places for the rest of San Francisco. And so if you look at the $120 million investment that Mayor Breeden and I fought for with redirecting resources from the police department to invest in the Black community, art and culture is a big part of that, focusing on arts, focusing on maintaining the artistic value of the Black community in the cultural district. And I think that's important. Cultural districts are going to make it so that when you arrive in a certain part of San Francisco, you will feel from the look, you will feel from the environment that you are in a place that is represented by a cultural district. And that's the important piece. When you go to Chinatown, you know the moment you're in Chinatown. When you go to Japantown, you know the moment you're in Japantown. And so we're trying to do that for all of our cultural districts across the city. I really think that's going to be a way to connect all of our residents to the various cultures that exist throughout the city, and really provide opportunity to make all these places a destination place. And there's so many things you can do in the cultural districts around art forms, around music, around entertainment. And if we can get our areas through the cultural district work to look like what we see when we go to Bourbon Street, or when we go to certain other areas, to other parts of the country that have thriving restaurants and thriving businesses that are coupled with everything else that magnify the culture of those areas, then we're going to achieve what we need through the cultural districts. And so I'm excited about this opportunity.
Wonderful. Would someone like to add to that?
I think that President Walton just really grounded it in exactly the right way. And then in the context of the national conversation, in terms of supporting culture and identity in this country, San Francisco really has led the way. Yes, there are other places with Chinatowns. Yes, there are other predominantly African-American historically recognized communities, but no city has done as much as San Francisco has through establishing a cultural district program like we have. Whether you talk about those places that are the sources of so many of our memories, or you talk about those other cultural spaces that are not specifically identified to a specific culture, but enhance culture, like shared spaces, it's important for us to continue to invest in those ways as well, and taking that equity lens to ensure that those who need those resources the most, by industry, by community, are getting those resources. To the point of someone who was commenting here in terms of the specifics, focusing on the business, grants, loans, the types of resources, 0% interest if there's going to be loans, flexible terms if there's going to be loans, easing of regulations so that small businesses are supported through those means, paying attention to the federal government, repurposing community development block grant funds to serve these ends that serve those small businesses and the workers who make them possible, being specific in that way. And then thinking about place, like we just talked about, cultural districts, neighborhoods, focusing our efforts there and being very specific about how we allocate resources appropriately and aggressively and progressively to ensure that small businesses can be successful in this city. I know it can sound broad at times, but those specific efforts, when you talk about 24 million in direct funds, $62 million plans that are focused on very specific entities, supporting artist communities to make sure they have the resources to be successful when they can't access state or federal resources, being very specific. I know it sounds broad, it just, the moment we get into the details, we have to, we become like the most sophisticated abacus that you've ever seen in terms of the time that we have and the density. We become less a short story and more War and Peace. And we want to keep that, we want to keep this conversation moving forward, but we are. And please make sure that you know that if you don't feel that way, push on us, because you will get a response.
Lori,
Just kind of, go ahead.
Sorry,
You mind if I say
everybody's so
something real quick? Go ahead, Lori.
Oh, go ahead, Randall.
Ladies
Okay.
first, mine's
Lori
this.
Thank you. Everybody's so eloquent. I just want to reiterate a couple things we could do. Is also, I mean, you see the Golden Gate Bridge, you see the iconic Fisherman's Wharf in the backgrounds, but one of the things we really want to focus on this year, and we started last year with the Fall Eat Drink SF Presents, is let's push our marketing dollars and our press out to the neighborhoods, and let's make it a journey into the neighborhoods, both with the food and, I mean, nothing against Fisherman's Wharf, but you guys get a lot of the press, right? So let's explore and open up the city, and there's the restaurants, the cafes, the nightlife, hopefully when we can come back to that. And that's really one of our key objectives this year, is to try to take the resources that so many people that say are connected or have the access could get, and try to help share that throughout the communities, and then try to help promote those areas, because we've all seen how successful shows like Anthony Bourdain's was traveling, and we can do that here in our neighborhoods. And so I know I sit on the board of SF Travel, and I know that we're looking at how do we reopen the gate, and that's one of the things I want to see, and we want to work with the restaurants. And you know, I'm open to trying to spread that out to the neighborhoods. And I know there's some questions here about Japantown, and there are certainly areas where if we don't provide some strong help, there's going to be just decimation of the businesses. And so we stand ready to help on that, but I really think we have an opportunity to showcase the neighborhoods this next 12 to 18 months.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Please go, Randall. Yes.
So I got another point, but to piggyback on what Lori said, absolutely. Go out and support your local restaurant and your local neighborhood. Explore the city, explore the neighborhoods, you know, eat local. We're actually going to be trying to work on a local campaign, but that's, we can help other areas. And we have, the CBDs are throughout the city. So, and we all talk. So Grace and Japantown. So yeah, totally support your local restaurants, get out, eat out. The restaurants need it. So totally in support of that. And yes, Fisherman's Wharf, we have, you know, we are what we are, but there's no reason why people can't copy us. And we'll help them do that. I want to reach back to, you know, what the city can do, just real briefly about, you know, entrepreneurship and really stimulating what people, you know, how we can get entrepreneurs out there. And I think we need to roll it back even a little bit further to our youth, you know, our high schoolers. Everyone here, the first question here about locals, what high school did you go to? You know, Lincoln, whatever it's, but if we can get big tech to partner with the city to invest in our youth in the high schools and really get them thinking about entrepreneurship and joining a small business, interning at a local business community, and start investing our dollars in our youth, I think we will see the benefit of that in, you know, years down the road, and more successful San Franciscans being able to stay and live here in the city, that rather than them just going off to college and, oh, I can't afford to live in the city and so forth, and just really fostering that that engine and that fire in a younger crowd. So we have big tech here. Why not use it? That's my point.
You know, I just wanted to go back to one point that President Walton said, and just share a little anecdote. I used to be a professional touring musician and would drive around in a van all over the country for many years running. And we would drive from town to town across all of America. And I had a nickname for America in my head, which was Generica, because every town was exactly the same. There was a Wendy's, there was a McDonald's, there was a truck stop, there was a Walmart, and you couldn't even tell from one town to the next where you were. And when we talk about the cultural districts in San Francisco and their value, they identify something that is remarkable and different and bring back heritage and culture, and communicate so much to people that visit that they literally cannot see in 98% of the country. And so that's one of the things that can really, I think, draw people in. It's one of the things that makes our city special. Just like the cable cars, they are things that stand out and are iconic about our city, and make people want to come visit from all over the world.
Thank you so much for that. I do want to talk a little bit about the homelessness issue that we are currently facing. the same person who talked about how we could support Japantown and, other key areas within San Francisco, also noted that, at a lot of these parklets and a lot of these closed businesses, the homelessness issue has it's exacerbated the issue. So the question is, and this is from him, I've lived in SF for over 20 years. I opened a restaurant in December. The homelessness situation is worse than it's ever been. Our current policies are broken. How can we help those who are in need? Very general, but as it relates to areas that you're specifically focused on, maybe tell me a little bit about what homelessness has been. Supervisor Walton talked about it a little bit about it earlier, but I'd love to hear from others just what you've been witnessing in terms of homelessness, and then what do you think we could do to work on that?
That's an easy one, right? Go ahead, Lori.
Well, I think, I think this is a big area of focus, especially as we start to reopen the city and we have so much need. And, I hate to call it homelessness, and think more that we should say, as Joaquin schooled me last year, bad street behavior, that we should really be thinking about that we know that we have housing, that we want to get permanent housing, but our concerns are, and I was on a call yesterday, I sit on a Clean Safe Coalition with other industry groups, and recruited SF Travel and the Hotel Council into a call with one of our board members who is in the Castro and who has been just experiencing horrific things at his parklets, and dangerous, and like people breaking things, and the tent encampments and fires. And this is kind of over my pay grade. I promised we would wade into it and try to do a series of webinars. Like I say, I sit on multiple coalitions, but I really think we need people that can take all of these different service teams, these crisis response teams, this CART response that we're talking to. I think also the police department. I sat on a thing today where listened to Chief Scott. So I don't know the answers, but I know that, to the point before, we have the opportunity now as we reopen to try to have a city that looks clean and safe and equitable and everything. And this is one of our biggest needs. And one of the things I did think worked really well last year was the convening of the SF Recovery Task Force, and all of us getting to know each other and work more between private and public, and form friendships and trust. And with that, we've been able to, I think, move mountains. And so I don't know if we need a task force. I do know that there are so many different people trying to solve this problem, and we all seem like we're churning a bit. Has just been my fire hose experience this past week with some meetings I've been in. So I would like to see more of a concentrated group that pulls a lot of these, say, 25 coalitions and different people together with different, and the advocates as well, for sure, and try to have the same kind of approach that we did so effectively, maybe at a smaller scale, but so effectively with the SF Economic Recovery Task Force. And that's all I've gotten to in the past week of trying to focus this as a top priority for us in the next couple months.
Yeah, so I can speak to this. I've been working on the streets and sidewalks in downtown San Francisco since 2013. I understand the problem better than most, and have been up close and personal with individuals who've died on the street, all the way to working, with the other entities who are screaming mad at why can't we fix this? And it is a hyper complex problem. And added to it, it's a humanitarian and human issues and civil rights, all intertwined. And it's tough. It's very, very difficult. And then you have the mentally ill aspect to it, and then you add in the addiction aspect to it. And so there's a whole spectrum. When people call homeless, Joaquin's point is there's bad street behavior, and that's induced by mentally ill on drugs. So, which is a small portion of the homeless spectrum, if you will. And it is a very, very difficult thing to tackle. Many hundreds of people and millions of dollars are being thrown at the problem. And I'm not saying that there's a solution out there. I would like to see, though, the city try and wrangle all of those efforts and really kind of look at the effectiveness of those efforts, whether it be via oversight or whatever. Prop C just passed, you know, and we have some oversight there. But there's so much money and so many jobs that are involved in this pie that I think clarity of effort and clarity of purpose is what's missing. Everyone's got their own different, you know, to Lori's point, there's so many different groups out there, you know, Rescue SF, Coalition F, you know, Clean State 365, and it's almost kind of white noise at this point. And it'd be nice to drill down and really focus on the areas. And I think that the two biggest areas that we can focus on as a city is not necessarily the mental health and everything. That's a huge financial burden, and civil rights and conservatorship. You know, and we have passed a conservatorship law, 2 years ago, and we still don't have anyone in conservatorship. So that's how tough that is. I think stopping the spigot, keeping people out of homelessness, which we've had programs that are fairly successful with. You know, they're one accident away or one broken arm away from being out on the street with their families and kids. You know, we have to work on keeping them off the streets, and then focusing on the people who are recently homeless. And because if we don't work on the recently homeless who've just fallen into that problem, they become the chronic homeless. You know, a lot of them do, not all of them. And the chronic homeless, again, those are the guys who I met with every single day. I know the guys at Peach and Taylor. Those are the guys who've fallen out of society, and trying to get them back into society takes a tremendous amount of effort. I've gotten people off the streets. I've got them in shelters. I've got them in permanent housing, only to have them fall back out because they couldn't adjust back into regular society, back into living inside. So I think if we really focus on stopping the spigot and getting those people who are recently homeless off of the street, I think that is where we're going to find our most success. Meanwhile, the other side, the city side, working with the state on the much larger mental health wraparound services, you know, that's where the dollars just skyrocket. So that's my quick 5-minute take on where we are at with the homelessness.
I just want to jump.
Sorry, go ahead, President.
No, go ahead, Commissioner.
Randall, I just want to thank you for that incredibly thoughtful summary, and I think there was a lot to agree with there. When I came to the San Francisco as a young man, I slept under park benches for quite a long time, and lived at the Civic Center Hotel for about 5 years. And during that time, got to know a lot of folks in the community. And I think you're exactly right in that there's a very short window of time in where you can really turn things around. And that's right as somebody's becoming recently homeless, not that that's the only time you can turn things around, but that's where the opportunity perhaps is greatest. And all of these people that we see, these folks, you know, genuinely, like, they could become a future president of the Small Business Commission. They could be a future mayor. They could be a future supervisor. There's so much potential there. And some of them are beyond brilliant, like just extraordinary minds. And so you're so right. It is a multifactorial problem, and it is going to require a lot of different resources. I think that one of the first things that we can do as a city and as a community is stop pointing the finger at each other and trying to rip each other down over good faith efforts, and start spending more time trying to work together and build bridges and build consensus on what actually works. I support that. I support anybody willing to engage in this process. I appreciate the shout out to Rescue SF. I think They've done some really great work. Urban Alchemy, amazing stuff. I think it also has to be said, this problem is bigger than San Francisco. It's not unique. It's happening in LA. It's happening in Salt Lake City. I was just there, and it is a national problem. And it's just very visible here because of how condensed it is. And, everybody is doing their noble best. And I support everybody that is making an effort along those lines.
Supervisor, I believe you wanted to.
I was just going to quickly say, and somebody put in the chat, I mean, the main thing, right, is to prevent folks from being homeless in the first place and putting policies in place that address that. I talked about how shelter capacity is down. I talked about how unemployment has gone up for all of San Francisco and the things that have helped exacerbate homelessness through the pandemic. But I do want to say with mental health SF, and we're starting to put the resources there, there'll be people responding that don't just have a law enforcement lens, but are actually professionals and experts who know how to deal with folks with mental health and substance abuse issues, the resources from Prop C. We did learn a few things about how to address some of our issues of folks being unhoused when now trying to purchase hotels and using resources differently during the pandemic. And so when we have more shelter space, when we have resources back to provide resources for permanent home housing and supportive housing, things are going to change. We have less tools available to us during the pandemic, but we also learn some new ways to get folks off the street. And I think you're going to see a combination of things that are going to work together for the good as we are able to open up.
Great, thank you. So this is, I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but it is about development. And it's open to whoever could speak to it. And it goes, would you guess that Central Soma plan will likely be on hold and that commercial development will slow over the next few years? That was a planned major area of development in our region, and I wonder what you think that short and long-term impact will be.
I'm going to jump in because I have to leave early. And I love this development conversation because depending on who you talk to, there are people who will say there's going to be disinvestment. People are going to stop developing because revenue has gone down, prices are high. But I have always seen that developers develop. That is what they do. That is what that is their sole purpose in life, and they will find a way to develop. And I also know that in a city like San Francisco, we always find a way to support responsible development, and that's not going to change because of the pandemic. And there are going to be economists and people who tell you different, but we know from historical data that that's not the case. And I just want to take the time to say this because I used to have these arguments all the time, with professors and economists who they're always talking about how the market drives everything and it's all about supply and demand, and that if you kick government out the way and let the market forces work, we'll be fine. Well, until you get into the middle of a pandemic, we're having this conversation and we're talking about how much we rely on our support from government, what we need government to do to help drive the economy. Because here's the reality. Economic forces work the way they do, but the only way to mitigate that and to create an equitable system where everybody gets support and what they need is through government intervention. So I hope we've learned that from this pandemic. I hope we learned this from looking at history, whether it was through the Great Depression or even some of our major recessions that we've had in the past few decades. We have a job to do as public servants here in San Francisco, particularly when we're in a time of crisis. And I just want everyone to know, as president of the Board of Supervisors, as one of many leaders here in San Francisco, we're going to be working hard to do everything we can to get the economy to thrive again, to open up our businesses, to make sure that there are opportunities for employment to increase, to bring tourism back, and to do everything this city needs to thrive. We have an economic recovery task force report. Obviously, there's going to be more work to do differently because we had that second shutdown, which was devastating, but we're working hard. As Assessor Torres ended his presentation, you saw the good news where we are now. And as long as we keep getting vaccines into arms, to Lori's point, making sure that they're accessible everywhere to everyone, we're going to be able to reopen and we're going to get back to a thriving city. And I just can't wait for that. And I want to thank the NDC and the rest of the panelists for being here tonight. Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate you. And we got work to do. We'll be back. I'll definitely be back to share all the successes after we get through this pandemic.
Love that. And once again, President Walton does his speech and drops the mic. It's got places to be. You did a wonderful job here. We appreciate you. And he's out. On that note, we are getting close to the end of this panel discussion. That was really interesting and wonderful. I really appreciate everything everyone had to say tonight. But let's see if we can squeeze one more question in before I turn it over to the president, who has some announcements. Let's talk about, and this actually might take longer, so feel free to answer this as quickly as possible, if possible. And feel free to say it's not. But what's going to happen to Union Square? I know I see people like, what are we going to do with Union Square? I believe the direct question was, as retail closes permanently across America, what will be the long-term plan for Union Square? And Union Square has a lot of our large businesses that are not, the kind of like formula retail, some of our bigger, places where people come from across to visit. So tell me what you think we could do to bring back Union Square.
So, go ahead, Joaquin.
No, go ahead, Randall. I'll jump in right after you.
All right.
So I came from Union Square. I used to work for Union Square BID. So I spent many hours on the streets of Union Square. And my heart's still in Union Square. My mind and love is with Fisherman's Wharf. Micro retail, I look at Union Square as, it'll always be a retail hub. We have San Francisco Shopping Center, Westfield Mall, whatever you want to call it. And, Saxon, it'll always be a retail hub. Kind of retail, I could see them going with experiential retail, entrepreneur retail, like the fashion incubator that used to be on O'Farrell. I think Union Square needs to kind of reinvent itself. And it's going to be very, very difficult. Joaquin, if you can move on that one, it's the C3R. Planning restrictions. So, but Union Square will bounce back. It will be fantastic. They have this amazing stage and everything. So it's going to be a hub of activation as well. And then a restaurant and hotel. So there's enough interest down there where it's going to come back and bounce back. But that's where I see it going, is innovation lead, incubator lead, restaurant, hotel, and tourism.
Yeah, I think the most important takeaway from there is that people believe that Union Square has a future. And if we believe that Union Square has a future, which we do, then we need to pay attention to it and invest in it and think about the user experience from the moment that you exit into Halliday Plaza, taking the cable car up a few blocks, if you do, or walking up Powell Street to experience the area around there. That means that we need to think about taking care of the spaces that are there, programming them effectively. To President Walton's comments in terms of how do people feel that it's a safe and welcoming space, as it should be, not only for residents, but for tourists, because that's your gateway to San Francisco for so many people, especially if they're staying in hotels once they're able to again, in a more voluminous way. We want to take care of that space. Landscaping, art activation generally, again, as we're able to safely start congregating again, thinking about how to build on the momentum and the desire that people will have. There is a space there, and where there is space and where there are people, there is traffic and there is retail opportunity. And so we can benefit from that. But I think that we need the support of being inventive, innovative about what's possible in that space, so that people want to be there and feel that there's still something special to experience in Union Square.
I agree. And just to like add one little note on that, as we see so much of our economy transition to delivery and e-commerce, there's still fundamentally something you'll never be able to download, and that's an experience that is being around other people. And the more we lean into community and creating incredible experiences for people to see and hear and feel, I think the better and stronger we'll be. And Union Square is the perfect place to make that happen. And I think all of the things that I almost said Director Torres, Assessor Torres and Randall said, I agree with, but it's fundamentally, it's going to be about experience, human experience, the stuff you can't download.
I do think this is an opportunity, Joaquin, I'm just going to call you Joaquin because it's easier, to look at special incentives to businesses, because, you guys have all heard, the minimum wage debate. We're way ahead of that. We're at $16.07 an hour. We've got the HCSO on top of it, all good policies, but things that make putting a big restaurant in a questionable traffic area an iffy investment. And so much like we did with the Market Street area and the Twitters of the world, I think we're going to have to take a hard look at what sort of incentives from a financial perspective need to happen to convince people that they should go into a business where maybe they keep 3 cents on a dollar if they're lucky.
Thank you so much.
I'll give a quick little plug for the Human Service Agency's Jobs Now program that can help subsidize bringing some people back to work that we initially announced right before the second shutdown. But certainly is definitely and definitively supportive for small businesses to make some of those financial choices, just to open up their doors, expand their space, and put people back to work, which is where they want to be.
We should remind everybody of that because I had forgotten in all of this churn. I think we should remind everybody.
Awesome. So we are just a little over, and that's a good sign. That means we were so engaged in the conversation, and it was wonderful that we forgot that it's past the time. So I want to just thank you all so much for being part of this panel discussion. And I don't think that this is the end of this conversation, obviously. So I'm hopeful that there's an opportunity to re-engage and maybe do a part 2 of this discussion. Who knows? But before you go, don't leave yet. I would love to pass it over to our president, who has a few announcements just before we close it out. Bruce, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Megan. And I too want to thank all of the panelists. I mean, it was just fantastic. Your insights, perspective, ideas of how to move forward. I know I walked away with a lot of, and I know that our members and friends and guests who listened in tonight really walked away with a lot of optimism. I mean, you all are the leaders here whether from a government and private perspective moving forward. Excuse me. So again, I just really want to, on behalf of Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club, we really thank you all. And Megan, such a fabulous job moderating this forum. And then also I want to thank Danny Souter, Roberta Economides, and Eric Du again for helping to organize and identify the speakers and pulling folks together and helping with some of the pre-programmed questions. And then for all our friends, guests, and members of ENDC, thank you for spending an hour and a half of your time. I mean, this was really, we know this is an important conversation, and we love San Francisco, and the economy is critical, and a lot of folks are hurting, and we've heard a lot of good news tonight, a lot of focus, a lot of things that we've learned through the pandemic, and some of the things that we hope that stay as part of the new normal going forward. We've heard those things repeated again and again and again. So I think those messages are loud and clear. So we have some virtual programming coming up. We hope that you all will join us for some of our future events. We have a forum on Politics 101 that'll be coming up probably in the next 6 weeks or so. We're going to do a forum on social justice, which is kind of a follow-up to a panel we did last year on police reform. And we also have an environmental day of service that will be focused out in District 10. Please help us continue our programming. If you're not a member of Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club, please join. That'll help us continue the work associated with organizing these types of forums and other organizing activities. As Danny mentioned earlier, you can do that by going to our website, which is www.sfendc.com. Go to our membership page. We'd love to have you as a member. And if anyone is interested in getting more involved in our programming or in a leadership role on our board, please contact any of our board members, or you could send an email to president@sfendc.com. And with that, again, thanks everybody and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.